All right, so before I start this episode, I do want to say that it's not my intention to be too educational in this episode. It's more like my experiences and what I see throughout my day to day life through race. So it's not going to be too much of like what is racism, what is like xenophobia and all that. It's mostly like that I will do on like my YouTube channel and everything. So you guys will see it. But as those for listen to on podcast, this is mostly going to be my experience of your race and like my race and stuff, and what my viewpoints are on here, like what I experience, what I see, and what goes on basically. So to get to like the quick point of the topic, don't ever be ashamed of who you are. You are who you are. You are where your parents came from, and it kind of generated a whole cultural belonging towards you guys. And honestly, if you live in the United States, that's kind of one of the basest things that the country itself was kind of formed upon, just immigrants. Although we have a dark history, I'm not gonna lie. Then again, the whole world itself has a dark history. Just humanity itself has a really dark history. But we'll get that in a different episode. So for now, I do want to say that no matter who you are, no matter what you look like, what tone of skin you are, like what specific race you are, whether it be white, black, brown, what's it called? Mexican, Chinese, Korean, Japanese, Guatemalan, oh, like everybody has experienced. I don't even want to say they've experienced, but they have knowledge of their race, where they came from, you know? Excuse me. And for me, I kind of don't see too much racism around where I live. That's a lie. That's a straight up lie. I do see it a lot. I do see it a lot outside of my town, but I also do see it a lot in within my town. And it's tricky to identify because some people will declare themselves as non-racist even though they will make slightly racist remarks, but in a different way. Because when when you work with a lot of people, you get to see their viewpoints. Well, I guess their point of views. And for some people, it's not necessarily racism if it's more about where they're coming. I want to say where they're coming from, which gets me into xenophobia, which is the idea of people that don't want people from a different country entering their country. So that's why it's like migrating to their country, I guess. So what I'm trying to say is the fact that how do I put this? When it comes to their own race, and they don't want their own race kind of coming here, is the thing that I'm trying to get. Like, for example, I'm Mexican, and let's just say that I don't want any more Mexicans crossing our border coming over here because I don't think that they should do that. I feel that in that case, I don't want to, like, you're not necessarily racist because you are that race. So that's why they have to come up with a different term. So in the heads of different people that live here, like even white people, black people, uh, Asian people, they some of them have the similar mindsets of what's it called? They're not racist towards that specific race, but they don't want people from that country coming over here, if that makes sense. It's an interesting topic, but I have dealt with people like that they have racial groups, racial friends, but because of the country, they just don't want those kind of people crossing over. And I forgot the term. I think it's a different form or different kind of racism where because they're not familiar with the cultural background and they've only seen and only been told of what that cultural background has, they're afraid. And when they're afraid, they tend not to want anything. So I find that extremely interesting. It's I don't even want to like I don't even know how to describe it because the way I see racism is just a discrimination towards a specific like a specific ethnic group or just a person in general. The people or ethnic group. That's what I see it as. discrimination or antagonism or prejudice. But when you talk to people who are quote unquote racist, they think in a different way, in a different form. So as the term hasn't changed, whereas they could, because they view it completely differently. Because even then they view me as an American, some of them, but they don't view my race as Americans, kind of a thing. Like they want to keep that separate because they weren't born here, you know? So at that point, it's not really race anymore. I don't even know. I'll need to do my research on what to call that, actually. I think it is like xenophobia. I'm like 90% sure. Because they have no problem with the race. They have a problem with the people from the country, if that makes sense. For example, I think I've mentioned this before in a previous episode, where, for example, I'm Mexican, but I am not a true Mexican, nor am I like a full-on American, I want to say. People who are in the middle are interesting, because even though I was born here, I can't really go to my own country, or quote unquote my own country, like where my parents came from, and say that I'm Mexican. Because, like, yes, although my race says I am, although the color of my skin says that I am Mexican, I am not one of them. I do not live like them. I don't have the same cultural background as them. I just look like them. I blend in. Even then, I stick out. I don't have the same form of tongue that they do. Yes, Spanish itself has a variety of different tongues and pronunciations, just like English. There's like, you got country and you got Western and all that. It's completely different the further you go down, and I am from like the bottom of Mexico. At least my dad is from the bottom of Mexico, and they can easily point me out. So it's interesting to get in their head of race. That's the way I see it from where I am from. Now, let's get into a more aggressive tone of racism, where they actually are more aggressive to you because of your race. I have seen that as well, especially living so close to LA. Now, it's harder for a lot of people, especially because most people, I don't think, realize that the form of racism, I want to say it's a specific target. I think that's systemic racism. No, that's a different thing. We won't get too much out of the topic now that I think about it. I think we should stick to how people view race. I think I'll do that mostly in my YouTube channel, if you guys want to check that out, when I get into more in detail about racism, systemic racism, and stereotyping people and all that. Right now, I want to stick to my main topic and see how people here like live based upon their race. So yeah, I kind of got a little sidetracked on there. Because I could really want to go into that, but that's not what this podcast is too much about. So if you want to go check out my YouTube, it'll be up, I want to say, the second week of April. Anyway, let's get into how myself, and I want to say my side of the family kind of grew up with our race and responding to our own culture and stuff. We kind of grew up not too much. Well, we didn't have too much to growing up and everything, but we were fine. We were kids. We were happy. We don't think about having a lot. As kids, we never really thought about having too much. We wanted stuff, don't get me wrong. But even when we didn't have anything, we got creative to wish that we had something, you know? Which honestly, I think that's the point of getting creative as a kid. So the less you have, the more creative you get. The more your mind is open. And my parents didn't have too much, but they still kept like our Mexican ethnicity within us, like our cultural background within us. They told us where we came from. They told us like how we acted, how they acted, how, you know, they kept our spirituality with us. We were raised Catholic, even though I have different opinions, and we'll get that's a different topic anyway. But we kept ourselves true to who we are. We still speak both languages. We still are bilingual and stuff. Well, most of us are anyway. Some better than others, but it it kind of didn't really, I want to say, affect me until I went to probably middle school when I started seeing more of race. Because when I was little, that's what they taught us, but they didn't really show us that we were like Mexican or be extremely proud to be Mexican. They just told us embrace yourself kind of a thing. They didn't really specify Mexican. So, at least not from what I've learned or remember. Not until like later. But they did teach us, I don't know, I want to say third grade, because around that time, that's when they taught us where people immigrated from, where people around the world, because I never thought about anybody else's race until I think I reached third grade. I think everybody was literally the same color. I was literally colorblind. That is in itself, I don't even want to say it's a form of racism, because it kind of is, but the meaning is not. I'll get into that in a second. That kind of flows with the topic a little bit. But growing up, and you see everybody like around you, I didn't really see anybody who thought that they were superior than anybody else, aside from, bullies in school, which I always hated. But they were even Mexican like I was sometimes, that they were just bullies and thought that they were above everybody else. Thing is that no matter what, I just never thought about it as race. It was more towards personality. And it was the more I grew up that I've learned more and more about race, and more about people's, like, history in general kind of taught us that. More about people's backgrounds and stuff. Then I started learning more about black people and their culture, white people, and somewhat of they don't have much culture-ish. It's interesting. They do, but they don't. And I'm gonna be honest. This is gonna be a little side rant, but just white people food is weird. I'm gonna be dissing a lot of like celery with peanut butter. What the fuck is that? Even avocado toast is. I thought it was weird, but then again, it's kind of more of my culture, if anything, and it actually wasn't that bad. But it was just small things that I didn't see growing up, that I saw growing up here. I want to say around. Like, for example, whenever my mom made us food or something, it was different from when other people made food. Like, the only American thing that I can think was good are not pizza, or hamburgers and hot dogs. That's about it. Everything else sucks about, food wise. All right, little rant over. But anyway, once we started to learn more about world history and stuff, that's when I learned more about everybody's races, where they're coming from, and then the different kinds of people. Asians especially, I've learned a lot, because they were divided into 7. There's a lot more than 7, but 7 I knew at the time, which was Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Philippines, and all of them, Indians, all of them kind of mixed up a little bit. But for the most part, everybody always joked around all Asians look the same, or you could see the difference in their eyes and stuff like that. Sometimes it is true, some stereotypes are true, but it's different when you're pointing out a stereotype to make fun of it, or to point it out because of a factual accusation. Well, it really depends on a lot on context. Anyway, that's when I started noticing a lot about race, and especially when you're a little kid, it still doesn't affect you at all. Because I never thought about getting pulled over by a cop. I never thought about getting assaulted because of my skin tone or anything. If anything, I fought back. But that never occurred to me until until I went to middle school. And the reason for that being is probably because of the area I grew up in, over in Thousand Oaks. And then when I went to middle school, I went to a different middle school, which was like over by Palmdale and stuff. And it's like a huge difference. It's like going from like, even if you go from like city to city, you see difference in people and how people act, the way people are, the way people do things. So, although there were still like Hispanics over there, Latinos over there, the my whole view on things changed, because that's when like more cops were around over in Palmdale, and they were stopping kids left and right. At first, I thought it was just because kids were being stupid, which, to be honest, I want to say most of them were. Now looking back at it, because they're in middle school, and it's annoying. It's kids themselves are just annoying, like preteens. But there was a lot more cops, and there was just a lot of break-ins. It was just an interesting neighborhood. Regardless, I saw people talking more about their race over there. I was like, it's because I'm black, it's because I'm Hispanic, it's because I'm not a different color, basically. So it's like, it's because I'm white, or like, do you want me to be your partner just because I'm Asian, kind of a thing. They use that a hell of a lot more over there than they did over here, from my experience. I want to point that out mostly because I have never lived inside the city. And I feel like at that point, that's going to get you in a whole other level of things. The more people there are, the more opinions people get. And culturally, your whole culture kind of just gets mixed up in things. Because when you're trying to celebrate your own culture, but you also want to celebrate another person's culture because that's the person you kind of grew up with. And that's what people who are mixed have a huge, like, I want to say, disadvantage. But also, it really depends, because not only do they have a different advantage because they have to kind of pick a side. Like, for example, if you're Asian and Mexican, you kind of have to pick a side because the other one will get slightly insulted, because Mexicans themselves have a lot of pride, and I know a few Asian cultures also have a lot of pride. It's mostly, from my perspective, pride that kind of kills everything else from different cultures, because they're like, you're not really one of us if you're more like them, kind of a thing, you know? It's really annoying, which I think that most of us should kind of really embrace it and like honor both sides. Like, why can't we just have both? We are both. Or just like a simple black and white person. They're like, I can't say the N-word, I can't go this far, I can't do this, or I'll still get pulled over, and you know? It, like, you choose to either be more white, or you choose to be more black, or you choose to be more Hispanic, or you choose to be more, it all lingers. It's all like over the place. And it's hard, especially because for most of the people growing up, they want you to embrace both sides of who you are, culturally wise. And it's tough growing up in a completely mixed cultural group, because that's like a third culture that you're growing up with. Like, I want to say you're socializing. Forgot the term, but your peers, they're growing with you. And through like Americans in general, it kind of like shapes you in a different way. You view different points. You have different points of views now, because you're growing up with a specific group of people that like their views change, or they never had this experience, or this doesn't happen in their neighborhood, so it probably doesn't happen anywhere else in the world, or something else. Or you go on the other hand, where he's like, this does happen in other places in the world, this doesn't happen here, let's try to calm other places down. Some people think it's not their responsibility, some people think it does, or it is. Like, it's a whole gradient, it's a whole variation of things. But what I'm trying to say is, no matter what your cultural background is, what your race is, try to ignore that for a second, breathe, and I don't want to say choose both, but literally choose both, I guess. I don't want to say not choose, I should say. I don't want to say don't choose. Or I guess don't feel like you have a choice. But embrace both of who you are. Embrace who you are. Because even if you're just like American Asian, right? Your parents are probably going to have a lot of pressure on you. But for the most part, you're not going away from your cultural roots. You're just kind of growing new ones because you were born here and you weren't born from that country that your parents originally arrived from. You're not necessarily erasing it, but you're just embracing your own and their own. So you're kind of creating a new one for yourself. And that's what I see a lot of races have, a lot of different races have. For example, like my parents came both from Mexico, so technically I'm full on Mexican, but at the same time, like I said, I'm not a Mexican because I did not grow up in Mexico. I don't know how to put that. I don't know how to reference that. I'm not one of them, but I am. Anyway, their full on pressure was for me to go to school, educate my brain, and like do everything that they couldn't. So that in turn is just a lot of pressure on my hands, on my siblings' hands. It's mostly just me and my older brother who got that pressure. But for the most part, that they kind of toned it down the more that they lived here. Because the more that they lived here, they've kind of like adapted to the lifestyle. And even my mom, or my mom doesn't really consider herself a Mexican anymore. Because yes, she grew up there, but she's lived here longer that she doesn't really she doesn't know anything about her own place anymore. She just knows around where she's from. So she wants to go ahead and explore more. The only problem that parents do have when coming over here is putting the pressure on their kids, because their purpose, what they claim to say, is that they moved here so you can have the better life. Which is, in turn, it is true. But that it also says a lot of pressure on you, saying you should live up to my expectations. Because sometimes parents do that. They want you to have a better life and see you succeed, right? They want to see you beat the other kids in that class. They don't care about the other kids. They care about you and why you are failing. So they tell you to get better. And I see that in all races, in Asians, Hispanics, even African Americans, or like anything. Indians especially. Like one of my friends was telling me his whole backstory about how his parents did not care about how he was getting bullied, about his race, about anything. They just cared of his grades. So that causes a lot of trauma for the kids. And I was one of those kids that would pick a fight with bullies because I hated bullies. So, a little off topic, but I have a small story. When anybody picked a fight with somebody who was either defenseless or something, I would always either step in, but I would kind of confront both people. I would confront the bully, saying, "Why are you picking on him? Why are you doing this?" Basically, and kind of like throw him off his game. And then as for the person that was getting bullied, I would yell at him. I was like, "Why are you letting yourself be bullied? Why aren't you standing up for yourself?" So I was literally yelling at both sides. It's interesting. But anyway, back to the topic at hand. What you should do, especially if you're a mixed race or a whole giant mixed race, like 6 different cultures or 6 different backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, I would say go slowly and research, go back to your roots a little bit, see the history of your people, even just the family tree if you want. You don't have to go all the way back, but just the family tree. Embrace who you are and like take it in. I don't want to say don't wish that you can be a different race kind of a thing, because you could always explore different ethnic backgrounds. Like there's nothing wrong if you just like, let's just say you're Indian and you just want to go ahead and explore like a Mexican background and stuff because you want to like see what it's all about, I say go for it. If you really want to learn from that ethnic background, what they do, go for it. Like I've actually been interested in a lot of Asian cultures at the moment, like Japanese and Chinese, and a little bit of Korean. Not as much, only because I've mostly focused into Japanese, but a lot of Asian cultures I've been like really getting into their home, their area, relating to their situations and stuff, which is why I see this like as like an interesting, I want to say viewpoint, point of view, an interesting point of view. I don't know why I keep saying viewpoint, because a lot of people that I've grown up with have had similar encounters. Like they just came here and their parents literally just told them, do good in school. They didn't really care what was going on in school, like if we got bullied or if we got this. They just told us, because we're both, we have to be more. I think it was like that quote from that one movie. I think it was the Selena movie. It was like, you have to be more American than the Americans, and you have to be whatever your original race is. You have to be more Mexican than the Mexicans. You have to be more black than black people. You have to be more Chinese than Chinese people. You have to embrace and use both. I just say, don't overwhelm yourself by that logic, because I say embrace both sides of you, and really do. And if you do go back and want to visit where your ancestors came from and stuff, that you have knowledge. That way you have knowledge of that background of where you came from and stuff. All you need to do is get by. You don't really necessarily have to fit in, because that's not where that's not where you are. That's where your parents were. You're just a legacy that's continuing in a different place, in a different country. That doesn't mean you can't practice anything that they've practiced before, or that doesn't mean you can't go back. But they thought they were doing the right thing by bringing you here. And as for, before we get into the a huge conflict of saying, like, what if I didn't have, or what if my family and background didn't have a choice? Because I get that from like a lot of African American people. They're like, all the way back to like the slavery things and stuff. Thing is, they have I want to say the hardest of all, because they don't really have the country to go back to. Like, what are they going to go back to Africa? Like, they have nothing to do with Africa. Like, after getting their ancestors getting brought over here and stuff, half of them jumping over the sea just so they know that they wouldn't be enslaved. But what I'm saying is, especially to them, or I guess especially to the people who think that they're equal, this is one of the analogies that kind of got to me about African American people, about black people. They say that they're now equal and stuff. They fought for their civil rights. They fought for their equality. Now it's equal. I want to say the answer is both yes. Well, I guess yes, but actually no. Why? Because there is still systemic racism. There's still racism in general, and mostly the analogy, which I'm going to say, if let's just say you're in a race, right? A white person and a black person are in a race. I heard this from, I forgot his name, but he made it like perfectly, like a really good analogy. He's like, you guys are both in a race, and the white person is already taking laps around the track, while the black person is in chains, right? By the time the white person already did like 12, 14 laps, they're already on top, more than on top. And the black person just did one. But now that you're saying, okay, you clip the chain, you clip everything, he is free to go at his own pace. Now that's the problem, is that he still has all those laps to run around to catch up to this person that is still running more and more laps, which is why I kind of am impressed with the white people, at least in my age group, in my area, that they see that the mistakes of their ancestors, they see the mistakes of what they have done. So some of them are helping the minorities, are slowing down and leaving stuff for the minorities to help them catch up. And because, especially like the black peoples who were stuck in chains, are finally free and able to catch up and everything, yes, you do see some people make it all the way to the top. But that's a very, very few. There are still obviously more white people in the country and stuff. But regardless, no matter what that is, these people are still stuck over here. They have to work more than twice as hard to catch up to the equality that we so quote unquote, or not we, or I guess whatever, that they were given. It's not an entirely fair race for the race, I want to say. But for the people that do, what's it called? I want to say, well, I'll get that part probably in a different video or a different episode. I was gonna go on and say, like, depending on where you live, for example, if you live in the ghetto and stuff, for both Hispanics and blacks, you get to the point where it's more on survival rather than your own race. Because a lot of people, or one person brought up, no, it's a cultural thing of why black people are down, because they keep holding themselves down. That is stupid. Because sometimes, although, let's just say even if it was true, it's not like they had too much of a choice to survive. Because that's, at that point, that's the only way to get money. Especially if you live poorly. Like, there's a huge thing going, like, it's a huge difference who's already on top and who you already let free around. But I do want to say the best advice I can give anybody who does live, like, in a terrible situation like that, like the ghetto, or even worse, is the best thing you can do is fight to survive, but don't follow the crowd, or don't follow the crowd in your area. Like, don't go up and join gangs. Sometimes I understand you don't even have a choice. Otherwise, you're done. You're dead. You're shot. Sometimes you really don't have a choice. But I say, do your best to break out. If you have the chance for school, because I know that most of the schools in those areas aren't the best schools. They have teachers that kind of gave up on you, gave up on the system. Which is why I have a lot of respect for teachers, especially who do want that. For the people that don't have the privilege, that we supposedly don't give, or don't have, I want to say, I don't even know. I want to say to do your best, not just in school, but just in life. Because fight to survive. Like, if somebody picks a fight with you, go ahead, stand your ground. Because, like, at that point, there's only so much you can do. Living conditions are way different. Like, I don't think people understand how big drugs are. And how big, like, these secret things are. Like, organizations, gangs. Like, everybody has an expectation they have to live up to. Especially if you're in those conditions. So, if you can break out and you have the opportunity to, go for it. You don't want to get sucked in just because they convince you that they're only doing this to protect your family, which they're kind of forcing you to do. It's very difficult for those people. And honestly, I'll probably make a whole different video on, like, the ghetto and stuff, especially if you live, like, in a not so privileged home or area. So that'll do it for now. This topic was very sensitive, so I am very open to any questions or anything. So I will be going up into much more detail on YouTube. So like I said, I'll probably have that up sometime in April. So until next time, hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. Peace.